You're going to turn 40, or you already have, and somewhere in the back of your mind there's a number you've been avoiding. Not avoiding because you don't care, avoiding because some part of you suspects the answer won't feel good, and it's easier to keep moving through the calendar than to sit down and actually calculate where you stand against where the research says you should be. You've told yourself you're probably fine. You have a job, you have some savings, you're not drowning. But not drowning and on track are two very different financial conditions, and the gap between them is exactly the kind of thing that stays invisible until you're 55 and the math suddenly becomes urgent in a way it never felt at 40. I want to give you the real benchmarks today, not to make you feel behind, but because knowing the actual target is the only way to know whether you need a small correction or a serious one. And then I want to give you the specific acceleration plan that closes the gap, because 40 is not too late. It is, statistically, the last age where the math still makes a dramatic recovery genuinely achievable without requiring either a windfall or a miracle. My name is William. Let's find out where you actually stand, and then let's fix it.
The real benchmarks. What on track actually means at 40. Fidelity's retirement savings guidelines recommend having approximately 3 times your annual salary saved for retirement by age 40. On the median household income for this age bracket, approximately $90,000 to $95,000, that benchmark is roughly $270,000 to $285,000 in retirement accounts alone. The actual median retirement savings for Americans in the 35 to 44 age bracket, approximately $60,000 to $76,000, depending on the data source. That gap between $270,000 recommended and $70,000 actual is the gap most people at 40 are quietly carrying without having calculated it precisely. I want to be clear about what this gap means and doesn't mean. It does not mean you failed. The median exists because half of people are below it, and being below a statistical median at 40 describes the majority of the population, not a personal failure. What it does mean is that the next decade requires a different intensity of action than the previous one did, and most people don't realize that until considerably later than 40. Beyond retirement accounts specifically, the broader benchmarks worth knowing. Net worth at 40 should ideally be approaching 2 to 3 times your annual income when including home equity. An emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses, fully funded. No high-interest consumer debt. A clear sense of your savings rate as a percentage of take-home, ideally 15% or above, redirected automatically rather than manually decided each month. If you're meeting all of these, you're ahead of the median, and this video is mostly confirmation. If you're behind on several, the next section is the part that matters most. Why 40 is actually the right moment to panic productively, not the wrong one. Here's the math that makes 40 a genuinely critical inflection point rather than just an arbitrary milestone. $1 invested today at 7% average annual returns with 25 years until retirement at 65 becomes approximately $5.43. The same dollar invested at 50 with 15 years remaining becomes approximately $2.76. The same dollar invested at 55 with 10 years remaining becomes approximately $1.97. This is not a motivational framing. It is the literal compounding math, and it means that every year of delay between now and the next several years costs disproportionately more than the same delay would have cost at 30, and disproportionately less than the identical delay will cost at 50. 40 sits at a specific inflection point, late enough that the urgency is real and undeniable, early enough that the math still rewards aggressive correction rather than simply documenting how far behind the gap has become. This is why the catch-up plan below is not a gentle, gradual recalibration. It needs to be a deliberate, front-loaded acceleration, because the compounding runway remaining at 40 still has enough length to make a serious correction produce a serious result in a way that the same correction attempted at 50 mathematically cannot replicate. Step 1 of the catch-up plan. Calculate the actual gap, precisely. Before any action, get the real numbers. Log into every retirement account you have, old 401ks from previous employers included, which a significant number of people forget entirely, and total the actual current balance. Compare that total against the $270,000 to $285,000 benchmark for your specific income level. The specific number matters more than the general feeling of being behind, because the size of the gap determines the intensity of the correction required. A $50,000 gap requires a meaningfully different response than a $200,000 gap, and most people skip this step entirely, operating instead on a vague sense of falling short that never translates into a specific, actionable target. Run your Social Security estimate at ssa.gov using your actual earnings record. At 40, you have enough contribution history for a meaningful projection. Combine that projected benefit with your current retirement savings trajectory to see the complete picture of what retirement actually looks like if nothing changes from here, not as a scare tactic, but as the baseline against which every subsequent action in this plan gets measured.
Step 2. Maximize the accounts you already have access to immediately. The fastest lever available to almost anyone at 40 is increasing retirement contributions toward the maximum allowable limits, not gradually over several years, but as aggressively as your current expense structure allows, starting with your very next paycheck. The 2026 401k contribution limit is $23,500. If you're not contributing at least enough to capture your full employer match, fix that this week. It is a guaranteed 50% to 100% return that no other financial move in this entire plan can match. Beyond the match, increase your contribution percentage incrementally each time you receive a raise, directing the entire increase toward retirement before your lifestyle has a chance to absorb it. The Roth IRA contribution limit is $7,000 annually for those under 50. If you don't currently have one open and funded, this is the second priority, specifically because contributions made now, in what is likely close to the lowest tax bracket you'll occupy for the remainder of your working life, grow completely tax-free for the following 25 years. If you're maximizing both and still have surplus income, a taxable brokerage account in the same low-cost index funds extends the acceleration further. The order matters. Employer match first, Roth IRA second, additional 401k contributions third, taxable brokerage fourth. Step 3. Find the accelerant. Income, not just savings rate. At 40, the savings rate alone often cannot close a six-figure gap within the remaining working years without becoming genuinely unsustainable, cutting so deeply into current quality of life that the plan collapses within a year from sheer fatigue. The more reliable accelerant, particularly for people in their 40s who are still 10 to 15 years from retirement, is income growth, specifically directed at the gap rather than absorbed into lifestyle. This means evaluating honestly whether your current role and trajectory represent your actual earning ceiling or simply the path of least resistance you've been on for several years. A negotiated raise, a strategic job change, a certification that opens a specific higher-paying track within your existing field. Any of these, if they produce a genuine and sustained income increase, can close a retirement gap faster than spending cuts alone ever will, because the increase compounds across every remaining working year, rather than producing a one-time benefit. The critical discipline here is directing the entire income increase toward the gap rather than toward lifestyle. A $15,000 raise that gets fully absorbed into a nicer car and a bigger apartment changes nothing about the retirement trajectory. The same $15,000 raise, with the increase automatically redirected to maximize retirement contributions before it ever reaches a checking account, meaningfully changes the math within a single year. Step 4. Address the fixed cost structure that's consuming the margin. For many people at 40, the obstacle to an aggressive savings rate isn't motivation, it's a fixed cost structure built up gradually across the previous 15 years that now consumes the majority of take-home income before savings ever gets a claim on it. The mortgage sized for peak optimism, the car payments, the subscriptions and recurring costs that accumulated without ever being audited. Calculate your total fixed monthly obligations as a percentage of take-home pay.
If that figure exceeds 60%, the savings rate problem is structurally locked in place, regardless of how motivated you are this month. There simply isn't enough margin remaining to direct meaningfully toward retirement, no matter how aggressively you want to catch up. This is uncomfortable to address because it frequently means confronting decisions that felt reasonable when they were made, the car, the house, the commitments that seemed affordable at the time. But at 40, with a genuine retirement gap and a closing compounding window, the fixed cost structure needs to be evaluated against the retirement trajectory it's currently preventing, not against how reasonable each individual decision felt in isolation when it was made.
Step 5. Protect the catch-up plan from the thing that derails most of them. The single most common failure mode for a financial catch-up plan started at 40 is not insufficient initial motivation, it's the gradual erosion of the plan across the following 18 months. The increased 401k contribution that gets quietly reduced after a few months. The redirected raise that slowly gets reabsorbed into lifestyle. The urgency that was genuinely felt while watching this video and genuinely forgotten 3 months later when life gets busy and the spreadsheet stops getting updated. The single best protection against this erosion is full automation, set up once and never requiring an ongoing monthly decision. The increased 401k contribution should be a payroll election, not a manual transfer you have to remember to make. The Roth IRA contribution should be an automatic monthly transfer set up the same week you open the account. The income increase redirected to retirement should be configured before the first paycheck at the new salary ever arrives in your checking account, not after, when the temptation to spend it has already had time to take hold. The plan that depends on remembering to follow it consistently fails within a year. The plan that runs automatically regardless of motivation survives the 18 months it takes to genuinely close a meaningful gap. If you ran the numbers in this video and found yourself behind the benchmark, that information is not a verdict on the last 15 years. It's the actual starting point for the next 10, and the math at 40 still rewards aggressive correction in a way the same correction attempted later genuinely cannot replicate. The families and individuals who close significant retirement gaps starting at 40 are not the ones with the highest income or the most financial sophistication. They're the ones who calculated the real number, maximized the accounts available to them immediately, found a genuine income accelerant, addressed the fixed cost structure honestly, and automated the entire plan so it survives the months when motivation alone would have failed. You have 10 to 15 years of serious compounding runway left. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, still enough. Use it starting today, not next month, not after the next raise, not when things settle down. Today. The gap is real. The runway to close it is still real too. Don't let this be the year you knew that and did nothing about it. Subscribe for a new video every week and drop your honest retirement savings number in the comments. No judgment, just the data that helps everyone calibrate.